On May 8, 2018, in Imbituba, Santa Catarina, Isadora Viana Costa, originally from Santa Maria, Rio Grande, Sol was experiencing what seemed like the beginning of a romantic journey. She was visiting her boyfriend, notary officer Paulo Odilon Xisto Filho, who was 36 at the time, but that morning ended in tragedy, a crime marked by violence and silence. Isadora was born in Santa Maria, the twin sister of Mariana and daughter of Hansi. From an early age, she showed a vibrant personality. She had degrees in fashion design and photography, was studying business administration, had tried accounting, and some believed she might pursue a career in law. She dreamed of becoming a Grêmio soccer club muse and charmed those around her with her graceful presence and contagious joy. Her relationship with Paulo was still new, about 2 months, but intense. They had met online in Santa Maria. He won her over with letters and promises, and she, captivated, visited him for the first time in Imbituba on May 7. In the early hours of May 8, according to the prosecutor's office, something happened that no one expected. After consuming alcohol and, according to reports, drugs, Paulo allegedly began to feel unwell and started foaming at the mouth. Alarmed, Isadora is said to have called his sister, fearing something serious was happening. That phone call, placed at around 6 a.m., would later be cited as the trigger for an explosive reaction from Paulo, later classified as a trivial motive for what would follow. The medical examiner's office concluded that Isadora suffered high-impact abdominal trauma between 6:20 and 7:30 a.m., consistent with repeated blows and mechanical force. The injuries were not related to a fall, substance intake, or resuscitation attempts. The evidence described a concentrated act of violence while the couple was alone in the apartment. What do you think could have triggered such a tragedy from a simple phone call? Leave your theory in the comments below. As the hours passed on May 8, 2018, the situation began to unravel into a web of conflicting versions. Paulo Odilon, Isadora's partner, was the one who called the fire department around 7:30 a.m. When the emergency team arrived at the apartment in the Villanova neighborhood, they found Isadora unconscious. She was taken to Snow Camilo Hospital, but showed no signs of life. What immediately drew attention was the condition of her body. Visible injuries in the abdominal area, recent bruises, marks that didn't align with a sudden illness or accidental fall. Paulo initially told the police that Isadora had slipped and hit the shower stall. However, this version didn't hold up against the medical evidence. Forensics determined that the type of abdominal injury the young woman sustained was not consistent with a simple fall. The scattered bruises and the intensity of the applied force pointed to something far more severe and intentional. A key moment came with the testimony of Paulo's sister. She stated that she had received a call from Isadora shortly before 6 a.m. On the other end of the line, Isadora sounded worried, mentioning that Paulo was not feeling well and that she needed help. That call was made while Paulo was still asleep, and the prosecution's theory is that, upon discovering the phone call, he became extremely agitated, triggering the fatal reaction. Paulo's contradictions continued to pile up. In addition to the slip and fall version, he claimed that the two had taken drugs and that Isadora began to convulse on her own. But Isadora's toxicology tests came back negative, dismantling yet another attempt to explain the tragedy. Investigators began to suspect evidence tampering and concealment. Prosecutor Enrique Lamangi stated firmly, there was no doubt that this was a deliberate assault triggered by sudden rage. The crime occurred in the context of a newly formed relationship with no history of fights or reports of violence, which made it all the more difficult to comprehend. Paulo Odilon was placed under preventive arrest and indicted for domestic violence resulting in death, aggravated by trivial motive. The trial of Paulo Odilon Xisto Filho began at the end of 2021, more than 3 years after the incident. The case, which had moved the communities of Santa Maria and Imbituba, finally reached the courts. With powerful testimonies, technical and a courtroom filled with attentive eyes from the press, family members, and curious onlookers. The defense argued that it had been nothing more than a domestic accident. The prosecution, on the other hand, firmly asserted that there were clear signs of violence. Prosecutor Enrique Lamangi presented the court with the forensic report, records of the messages exchanged between Isadora and her friends, the contents of a phone call made to Paulo's sister, and the toxicology report proving the absence of any drugs in the victim's body. Furthermore, the prosecution emphasized that Paulo attempted to interfere with the scene, cleaning trace cells and disturbing the setting before help arrived. This was pointed out as an attempt to erase crucial evidence. The most decisive detail in the trial was the analysis of the abdominal trauma. The forensic expert who conducted the report was emphatic. The force applied was inconsistent with any kind of simple fall. The severity of the internal injury indicated a series of strong impacts within a very short time frame. The cause of death was attributed to an abdominal collapse, not an accident in the bathroom. Another striking moment was the testimony of Mariana, Isadora Xisto Filho. Her emotional words brought out the humanity of the victim that interrupted dreams. the path of a young woman striving to grow, to work, to graduate, and to build her own career. The jury listened in silence. Some were in tears. Then came the turning point. The defense tried to argue that Paulo had suffered from a sudden emotional disturbance, a state of mental disorder, but that strategy failed to move the jurors. In the end, the verdict was clear. Guilty. The sentence was set at 22 years and 6 months in a high-security prison. After Paulo Odilon Xisto Filho was sentenced to 22 years and 6 months in prison, the atmosphere was a mix of relief and emptiness. Isadora's family, especially her parents and her twin sister Mariana, attended every stage of the trial. With quiet pain and composure, her father Rogerio said in an interview that the sentence was an important step, but nothing would ever erase the absence of his daughter, whose light and sensitivity still echoed in the objects in her room and in the memories of daily, family life. The city of Santa Maria, where Isadora was born and raised, followed the case with deep emotion. Childhood friends, teachers, and university classmates left messages, photos, and tributes. Isadora was known for her wide smile, her authentic style, and for always encouraging others to chase their dreams. Many shared how she often spoke about traveling, building an independent career, and one day starting her own business in fashion or photography production. The case also sparked movements supporting the family and campaigns in Isadora's memory. In her hometown, an event called Lychee for Isadora gathered young people for a vigil, holding candles and wearing blue, her favorite color. The initiative aimed to transform pain into awareness, to discuss fragile relationships, warning signs of controlling behavior, and the importance of early reporting. Asterisk. Paulo, on the other hand, was transferred to the Santa Augusta prison in Guisio, where he is currently serving his sentence. His defense team appealed the decision, trying to reduce the sentence, but so far, all attempts have been denied. The case became emblematic in Santa Catarina, often cited in lectures about abusive relationships and emergency response protocols. His sister, who had received a call from Isadora on the morning of the incident, has never spoken publicly about the matter again. Isadora left a mark. Her story found a voice through the pain of those she left behind, but also through the hope that other young women might see themselves in her journey and learn to escape any situation before it's too late. The case, though legally closed, still resonates as if something remains unexplained, a silence heavier than the evidence, heavier than the conviction, heavier than the legal outcome. What do you think really happened to Isadora? Leave your theory in the comments below. If you liked the story, give it a like and subscribe for more mysteries like this.